If you're an early stage Web3 founder, apply to our award-winning accelerator program, Basecamp, at outlierventures.io/Basecamp. We write your first $50,000 check and give you access to 200 mentors, including many of the leading Web3 founders, and a network of 1,000 of the world's leading investors and exchanges. We've helped over 30 startups from 15 countries from all around the world raise $130 million in growth funding and can help you fast-track product market fit and, where relevant, the launch of your token economy. So today I'm really happy to welcome Dr. Gavin Wood, President and founder of the Web3 Foundation, founder and CTO of Parity Technologies, and of course, Polkadot. Welcome to the show, Gavin.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm happy to be here.
So I've been trying to make this happen for some time. We kind of finally did it. So I'm going to give it a shot. Polkadot is a scalable, heterogeneous multi-chain, and we're going to obviously unpack that a little bit later. It allows for new designs of blockchains to communicate and pool security. Or more simply, Polkadot is a network that connects blockchains. Gross simplification, but again, we can expand that. And you describe yourself as a free trust technologist. And again, that's something I definitely want to try to unpick a little bit later. So there are obviously many reasons why I wanted to get you on the show. But I guess firstly, given the title of the show, you were the first person I heard to put blockchain and crypto in the context of Web3 as a distinct phase in the evolution of the web. And obviously different to Tim Berners-Lee's original vision of Web3. And I think this is a really good example of you being one of those people who is deeply technical, but also able to explain and contextualize things in a accessible way. And as I was doing a lot of my desk research, it was really easy. I just went onto your YouTube channel and there were some bits of content there full of sound bites. So I'm going to kind of reference loads of those back to you. So obviously prior to Web3 Foundation, you were CTO and co-founder of Ethereum and inventor of the Solidity language. When I put out the tweet to say you were coming on the show, I had the most inbound questions ever. And they were all quite sensible, actually. No trolling, which was surprising. But a lot of excitement and anticipation around Polkadot and parachains. And as an accelerator, I've certainly noticed that we just had a call earlier today with our venture partners. They're kind of like scouts that go into various ecosystems and find startups. They're also often analysts at VC firms and stuff. And they were all asking around, are we investing in Polkadot-based projects? Have we found any? What kind of niches and subsets are they operating in? And so just for future listeners, this is kind of Q3, Q4 of 2020. There are already 250 projects working on or with Polkadot listed on Polka Project. Don't know how up to date that is. And as much as I would love to do a retrospective on you as a founder in Web3 at Ethereum and everything else, I think it's probably a best use of the next 45 minutes to focus on the present and future of Polkadot. So normally I would go into quite a bit of background into the person just to contextualize them and give them origins, but you're obviously fairly well known. So I'm going to kind of cut straight into the more meaty stuff. But what I did think was interesting as I kind of look at your background was this theme around music and audio technology, which is something I didn't know about you. So you did a state-of-the-art real-time musical audio analysis engineering environment using advanced MIR algorithms, machine learning. You also researched, designed, and led the development of an audio portion of frontier developments in next-generation cross-platform gaming. So what was that background? What were you doing there?
Well, yeah, I mean, my PhD was in music visualization, which was, algorithmic music visualization. So coding up stuff to analyze music and turn it into something that can help people understand what it is without listening to it, just sort of seeing it. I came at this from I love music and I want to kind of understand how it works, how I experience it, and I want to turn that into something that's maybe more accessible or very immediately accessible, through vision. And that was more from just the love of music and the fact that I tend to explain the world by writing programs. then after that, I did go to this game studio to try and work on one of the sort of games that I was assuming that they were working on. It turned out they weren't actually working on this game, so that was sort of unfortunate. And they were like, "Oh, but we see you've done a lot of audio engineering for your PhD, so why don't you write our next generation audio system?" And it was like, "Well, yeah, sure, I guess." So I was working on that for a year or so, and but it was really good. It was really a feat of engineering. It was particularly interesting for me because back in that time, which was like early 2006, it was when the next generation consoles were coming out, air quotes there, in that they're not really next generation anymore. They're like 2 generations past now. So the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3, and the sort of general PC gaming. And the idea was to write something that was cross-platform amongst all three, which was itself like quite a difficult thing to do, but also that allowed you to write really quite interesting audio effects stuff and have it like utilize the very particular hardware that was in the PlayStation 3, this like what was it called, a cell processor, and it had like these synergistic processing units that were a bit like a sort of GPU shader unit, but a little bit more useful, but not as useful as a CPU. It was quite an exotic architecture, and therefore something that to make something cross-platform was quite a lot of thought and engineering behind. But yeah, it lasted me a year. I had a great time, and then I decided to sort of move on to other things.
Well, I guess we might talk about creative industries and NFTs in the context of parachains a little bit later. It'd be interesting to get some of your thinking around that. And I guess worth highlighting the reason why it's Gav of York on Twitter, as you did. I don't know if you're from York, but you studied at University of York in a Master of Engineering, Computer Science and Software. Are you from York?
I'm actually from Lancaster, from the other Rose. So a bit of a traitor to my birthplace, really.
Oh dear. Okay. All right. Well, that segues us quite nicely into Ethereum, I guess. So you're best known for being co-founder and CTO of Ethereum, 2013, 2015. You coded the first functional implementation of the platform, authored the yellow paper, the first formal specification of any blockchain protocol, which is no mean feat. And then in 2015, you founded and were our lead developer at Parity Technologies. And the stated mission, anyway, for Parity is to enable businesses and organizations to capitalize on blockchain technology. Now, obviously, Polkadot's come out of that. That frames it as quite an enterprise pitch. Is that still relevant? Has it evolved, or?
It's evolved, yeah. I mean, it's we were always about using, sort of this low trust cryptographic, cryptoeconomic, game theoretic kind of new systems in order to facilitate things. And certainly in the early days, it was in some sense about trying to use the Ethereum sort of technology set that I've been working on for the sort of 2 years or so before, to try to bring that maybe kind of to enterprise. That was our kind of vague thinking at the time, but it definitely morphed over time. And we have had some sort of enterprise wins, the World Food Programme being sort of one of the notable ones. But at the end of the day, it's really about bringing this technology to market, bringing it to it's equally in my mind equally applicable to both sort of individuals, and kind of NGO kind of style organizations and enterprise and corporates.
Yeah, I mean, and having also spent far too much time trying to convince enterprise that they should be thinking about Web3, I think it's naturally you go where there's the point of least friction, and clearly there's this growing new digital economy where there's a load of demand. So you also co-founder of Grid Singularity, also founded in 2015. Was that linked to Parity? Was that one of the enterprise plays? Because that's obviously linked to the energy sector.
Yeah, I mean, it was, at the time, it was the idea of being, I don't know, partners is a bit of a loaded term, but, you know, kind of being well, moving in line with each other, being well aligned sort of entities with grid singularity, obviously, being in the energy, particularly green energy sort of industry, trying to use the software, trying to use the tooling that we did. And there was some success there. I mean, EWF coin sort of came out of that, the Energy Web Foundation. But I mean, yeah, it's, I think to a large degree, we kind of went our way with Polkadot, and you know, I think there's still going to be some level of collaboration going on. I mean, EWF chain is using our old Parity Ethereum at the moment, now open Ethereum. But I think there's a lot more work that can be done in that direction, and I look forward to Parity sort of helping steward that.
Well, I mean, so then we move into founding of Web3 Foundation, and with Polkadot, there's just so much going on there. There's so much to do. Clearly, that is going to be a huge part of your life. So the kind of descriptor for the Web3 Foundation was to safeguard decentralization. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, in this sort of odd world we live in, there's an increasing, the internet sort of came about, and it's great, and it had this sort of tagline of, it's going to decentralize everything. But actually, what we ended up finding was that although the internet, in some sense, is sort of a decentralized, technically speaking, decentralized system, it very quickly became sort of subverted and co-opted for these heavily centralized entities, even perhaps more so, you could argue, than business entities, corporates, enterprises, and so forth that exist in the sort of meat space world. And that is why I think, that's why I would argue that the internet, as in and of itself, doesn't really have an opinion on decentralization or not. It's just a layer. It's just a sort of a medium on which we can build, sort of communication, digital based organizations. And what we actually need, if we want to utilize some of the advantages of decentralized systems, then we actually need, specifically decentralized systems to sit on top of it, that deliver those advantages. Otherwise, we'll be we'll be bound by the same kinds of social systems that we've had up until now, which are very much trust-bound systems that deal in terms of intermediaries and global reputations and established actors, and not anything that's really sort of riffing off the advantages of being decentralized.
Yeah, and I've heard you use this term. I don't know if it's yours, but if it isn't, you should just claim it. That commoditizing trust. So the idea that blockchains as trust systems can commoditize trust. And is that linked to this free trust technology kind of tag that you use to describe yourself?
Yeah, because trust is a weird term. But people think of it as a good thing. It's like, oh, yeah, I trust my government. That's a good thing. But the thing is, you shouldn't have to trust your government, right? There should be enough checks and balances in place. There should be enough transparency in place that you yourself don't actually need to trust them, because you can check, or you can find someone that cares, that you have a good relationship with, and have them check. Unfortunately, for most people, trust still does remain the sort of the good thing, the ideal thing. And so when you talk about things like free trust, it doesn't trust free, trustless. It's like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Do I want to have a trustless relationship? I mean, I like being able to trust. But yeah, commoditizing it is the other sort of way. I think this is sort of maybe a little bit more what enterprise, how they think about trust, because they understand what commodities are. Nice commodity marketplace. You can really sort of bid each other down. You get good prices. And it's sort of the same thing. The idea is that it's not trust itself that you're commoditizing per se, but it's the replacement to trust. It's the thing that means that you don't have to trust. And by introducing this, you can kind of it's almost like you can say you've commoditized trust. You've turned it into something that isn't special anymore. You don't need to go through the handful of banks to do your financial services. You don't need to trust your government in order to know that your vote is being counted, or whatever everything else.
And so with the Web3 Foundation, I mean, a big part of that is advocacy just generally for Web3. But of course, the big thing that's come out of it is Polkadot. And of course, it's a collaboration between Parity, the Web3 Foundation, and the wider Polkadot ecosystem. But, I guess the mission, understanding the mission behind Polkadot, the why Polkadot, is kind of linked to this, this mission around extending Web3 and its reach. And I think you've taken a really novel approach to bringing it to market with Kusama. And again, I want to kind of unpack that a little bit, the decisioning, the rationale behind it. But Mainnet went live relatively recently, May 2020. I'm sure it probably feels like a lifetime ago to you. But if we look at Polkadot in the context of your journey at Ethereum and then looking to move forward, I heard you kind of describe it as there's initial thought exercise that, what would a greenfield ETH2 look like? And that was kind of the genesis of the thinking, even currently at Ethereum. But why did you feel it important for Polkadot to exist as an extension or separate to Ethereum?
Well, I mean, part of it was through impatience. Like we had a great team. We wanted to do something. We wanted to build interesting stuff. That's what people want to do. That's what developers want to do. The good ones are the ones that are sort of curious. They want to explore. They want to, it's not a question of why do it. It's a question of why not do it. If it seems like an interesting idea, then, let's just go and implement it. It doesn't take that long, and we can try it out. We can experiment. And it's for the pure joy of curiosity and experimentation. And so a big part of it was that. It was like, look, here's an interesting idea. Why don't we run with it? And if it works out, it could change everything. In any case, it's sort of a new thing. This idea of a multi-chain, heterogeneous multi-chain. It's a new thing. No one else is doing this. So maybe let's go off in this direction, see what turns up. But yeah, I mean, we didn't want to hang around forever waiting for, ETH2 design to land. I mean, it's 4 years later or something, and it's still not really nailed down. In that regard, I don't regret anything. It was, of course we should have gone off and do our own thing rather than wait another year and another year and another year. And for me, it was also about trying to minimize how much we're doing. We didn't want to do you can imagine everything. We wanted to really just create the core of the platform initially, which is, partly why we didn't try and do something as big as a huge sharded smart contract platform where it does everything that the existing platform does. Really, we wanted to break it down to just the very core of the platform and let other people build on it. So really, it was more like an innovation engine than a full-on user platform.
It almost felt like an antidote to what we were seeing happen in the wider Web3 ecosystem, where we were seeing isolated legal systems creating these false barriers, these silos between blockchains. And you described it as Polkadot as a bet against chain maximalism. And this idea of sovereignties, again, I've heard you talk about Web3 in the context of sovereignties, and also this shift away from purely thinking about tokenization, blockchains as currency and kind of economics, but to becoming more political and decision-making. And I guess what you're talking about there, this inability for one of these systems to adapt quickly enough, was as much a political problem as it was a technical one. Is that a logic that follows into some of the thinking around Polkadot?
Yeah. I mean, I see really blockchains are about allowing people, maybe even machines, to govern their interactions, to have rules over their interactions and allowing those interactions to happen without the need to trust each other, the good expectation that of what the ramifications will be of any given message or transaction or action, instruction. And it doesn't matter whether it's, one of the ways that you can interact is send money, send value, right? That's one of the ways you can interact. And that's where Bitcoin came from. It's like, we'll send this number, this piece of value, this scalar, it's just a single number between people. But that's just one of, myriad ways that people can interact with each other. And it wasn't long after Bitcoin that, I don't know if you remember, like 2012, 2013, there were like colored coins. And it was like, you can color these Bitcoins to be like not just Bitcoins, but like red Bitcoins or Bitcoins that represent dollars or Bitcoins, I don't know, that represent some piece of some asset. And it was sort of like the initial version of NFTs, I suppose, but they happened sort of on the Bitcoin blockchain itself. And there was special software that would analyze the Bitcoin blockchain in order to pull out whether, this particular Bitcoin had a particular color and therefore a meaning aside from the fact that it was a Bitcoin. And of course, afterwards, like after that, there was Ethereum. People were like, oh, we could interact with each other in, kind of smart contracts, and we can create rule sets by which we, fairly arbitrary rule sets, by which we sort of play a game with each other on chain. And in the end, it's like, this is all about allowing people to interact with each other, and nothing, like it's as general as that. It's got nothing to do with currency per se. Currency was just a use case. And in my mind, governance is really just another very basic, like currency form of interaction between humans. So this like collective decision making is really, and the means by which a collective makes a decision. Like, is it a vote? Do you randomly choose someone? Do you do a combination of the two? Do you have like hierarchies? There's all sorts of questions, and this is all stuff that has been like debated for millennia. And now we have this like really awesome technology that allows us to take the fruits of these debates and make, really whizzy, fast, sophisticated systems, allowing us to become like collectives and govern ourselves. So a lot of, for me, it's like currency and DeFi. I mean, it's fine. It's interesting. You see it working. It's kind of like, okay, fair enough. But like the more general thing is like these social systems and finding and experimenting with new ways of allowing people to organize themselves with each other is also one of the very exciting frontiers of this technology.
And you describe that as agency, and you talk about Polkadot in the context of full agency. So if you look at that evolution of use case, you have, you call it tokens, the 3 C's of tokens: commodity, like digital gold; currency, like Ethereum, ETH, and then corporation, around this kind of governance context. So maybe that's a good point to start going into Polkadot itself and to try to unpack this scalable, heterogeneous, multi-chain idea.
Well, okay. So, yes, Polkadot is a scalable, heterogeneous multi-chain. It's like the scalable, heterogeneous multi-chain. There are no others. What does it mean? Well, basically, it's a multi-chain because it's made up of multiple blockchains. So that's the easy one. You can take Polkadot, compare it to 100 blockchains, and it's sort of got a bit in common with them, right? It's like Polkadot can also be, we hope, 100 blockchains. So then it becomes scalable and heterogeneous. What does these mean? Well, the heterogeneous bit basically means each of those blockchains, each of those 100 blockchains can have arbitrary transaction processing logic. So some of them might be like Bitcoin, UTXO based, very simple scripting language, basically lets you send an amount number between the participants, between accounts. Another example of business logic would be the Ethereum blockchain's business logic, smart contracts. So this is where, I have an account-based system, and an account can be just like a secret key, public key pair, or it can be a smart contract, a little computer program that sort of runs its instructions when you send it some funds, when you ping it with a transaction. Now, these are quite different propositions, but they all fit into the blockchain metaphor, right? They all basically, they all process transactions. The transactions all do something, and and they have some state, right? They have a Merkle tree, put it in a Merkle tree as cryptographic data structure. So they have some state that they maintain, the transactions come in, they flip some stuff in the state, and then the next one comes in, and so on and so on. You bundle them into blocks, that's a blockchain. So crucially, in Polkadot, these 100 blockchains or so can each have different business logic. They can each be really good at doing different things. Like Bitcoin blockchain is really good at like being Bitcoin, basically at passing currency between accounts. The Ethereum blockchain is better at handling smart contracts. And there are others. There's like Namecoin, which is really good at doing registries, and a few others. And the point is that it's not enough to have a Turing complete blockchain, in air quotes again, because you always have to make these design decisions, these trade-offs, these design decisions. How is it Turing complete? How do you manage things like resource metering? How do you guarantee that there isn't any spam, or that one smart contract doesn't just take everything up? What language do you use for the smart contract? How do you manage transaction queuing? How do you manage the priority for transactions? All sorts of these design decisions, these trade-offs that you have to make. And it's and the point is also, as you become more general, you necessarily lose efficiency. Yeah, your performance gets down, because just like basically any part of computer science, in any part of engineering, generality costs you stuff. It's like a CPU might be very general, but you don't want to do 3D graphics processing in it particularly. You want to push that off to a specialized unit, the GPU. So that's basically why it's heterogeneous. These different chains can each do different things. And then it's scalable. Scalable is one that you might sort of, a lot of people get confused about scalability. It's like, well, if it's a multi-chain, surely it's scalable. You've got 100 blockchains. It's like, well, it's not enough to have 100 blockchains, because 100 blockchains, like, there are 100 blockchains. It doesn't make blockchains scalable. What makes it scalable is if you've got 100 blockchains and they can all talk to each other, and very importantly, they don't fight each other over the very scarce resources of security, right? So security of a blockchain is, for a proof of work blockchain, it's basically mining power. For a proof of stake blockchain, it's basically capital, right? Now, both of these things are things that if you're using on one chain, you basically can't use it on another chain. Now, there's something like merge mining where you can try and argue that, well, the same mining power could be used for both, and it kind of works, but there's all sorts of tangly issues with doing merge mining. But in general, these resources cannot be shared between chains easily. And what Polkadot does is it says, right, well, we will scale these. I mean, Polkadot's proof of stake, so it basically means we will scale this capital across these chains. And we'll do it in a way that is super easy to do. Basically, validators just run Polkadot, and Polkadot manages all of the security of all these 100 chains that make up, or so, whatever. I don't want to like say 100 chains that ends up being 99, but 100 or so chains that makes up the Polkadot community.
And so you talk around this emphasis on governance and upgradability in the context of combating forking. Could you talk through that a little bit? And then also this reference to agency, how you are full agency as a system.
So agency is really about a sort of economic concept, and it's the ability for a given system to make its own decisions, to sort of take control of itself. It's sort of the difference between a rock, which has no agency, it just sort of sits there and does its thing, and let's say a person that has agency in that they can decide what they do with their day. Now, some systems are designed to be rocks, because rocks you can reason about a rock. You can say, right, well, it's shaped like this today. It's probably going to be shaped basically the same way tomorrow, unless some very large person with a big sledgehammer comes along and starts smacking at it. It stays as people like things that stay, that if it's for a particular purpose, such as, let's say, managing your assets. If you buy a part of a rock, you can be pretty sure that it's going to remain part of a rock. Like if you buy a lump of gold or a piece of a lump of gold, then you can be fairly sure it's going to be the same piece tomorrow. The reason is that gold is very stable. It as an element, it doesn't really react with anything. And And this level of stability, of constancy is very important under certain circumstances. But the thing is, it also means it doesn't adapt. If it's gold, it's always going to be gold. And if for some reason the world changes, if you find a meteor that's just 50 billion tons of gold, then the existing gold on Earth will be worth very little because we've got so much more gold that we just suddenly managed to discover. If basically the point is, if the environment changes, and it always does, in such a way that it's disadvantageous for this system, for this thing, then it's going to eventually become obsolete, irrelevant. And we're kind of already seeing that with blockchains of the past, ones that really have found it very difficult to change. Bitcoin probably will survive, but primarily simply as a currency that enough people have bought into. But it's questionable with any of the other blockchains whether they can seriously argue that they could survive over time, given that they don't really have any way of adapting to changing circumstances. And those changing circumstances can be very simple ones, like, well, another blockchain comes along that can do everything but bigger, better, and faster. And what agency does is it says, right, well, actually, we're not going to be a lump of rock or a nugget of gold. We're going to be, sort of living, breathing, corporate, if you like, or human-like entity. We're going to be able to make our own decisions. We're going to be able to change ourselves for the better. We're going to be able to adapt, right, and evolve. And this is, I would argue, absolutely critical in a fast-moving world where, things are changing, where technology is changing, the environment is constantly changing. Unless you really are sort of basically your raison d'etre, your USP is to be something that never ever changes. But there can only be a few things, right? If you have 1,000 Bitcoins, there's only going to be one of them that is the one that people actually bother buying into, because you don't need 1,000 things that none of which change. There can be one thing whose USP is to not change, but everything else basically is stuck in a race. And you have to find, what it is. You have to either adapt or find what it is that's special about you. But it's probably not going to be that you don't change.
And how does that practically play out? Because I understand there's agency in the system as a whole, but then also in a parachain. So you mentioned this number, whether it's 99 or 100 of blockchains that comprise the Polkadot network. They're called parachains. So does that agency then extend down to the parachain level?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So the idea is that parachains are just as able to make their own minds up about what they are as the relay chain, as the Polkadot main chain. And they're both based, there are two main things, I think I probably covered it, two main things that will give you agency. The first thing is you have to have some way of actually changing yourself, like actually kind of making decisions and enacting, they have to have some way of enacting decisions. So those decisions are about how you should alter yourself into the future, then great. The other thing is you have to have a way of making those decisions, right? So it's the two halves. You've got to be able to make a decision, and you've got to make sure that decision actually gets enforced, enacted, whatever. And we've seen systems that can make decisions without them being enforceable. And, we haven't seen many systems that can, actually enforce or enact decisions without any way of actually making them. But decentralized systems have a slightly more cumbersome, complex problem, which is that there isn't like a CEO or something, a CEO of Bitcoin or a CEO of Ethereum. There kind of is a CEO of Ethereum, really, but there isn't a CEO of most of these systems, in theory at least, that has the ability, that has the authority to make that decision for the network, because it's a decentralized network, right? Lots of different people, all politically different alignments. So it's very difficult for them to, on the face of it, come to any decision about how they should change en masse. And that's where we have governance, which is this way, the algorithm, the processes for how to make decisions. And then separately to that, we actually have to enforce them. So Polkadot allows both of these things to happen. It has governance systems based largely on pre-existing governance systems, bicameral, tricameral systems. And also it has what we call like this WebAssembly sort of upgradable meta protocol, right? So meta protocol, very simple, to unpack that very quickly, is we have a protocol like Bitcoin, protocol like Ethereum. A meta protocol is a protocol that sort of sits underneath as like a higher degree sort of thing that the other protocol works on top of. And the idea is that the meta protocol for Polkadot doesn't actually include any of the important stuff for Polkadot. All it does is it includes a means of interpreting what it is that this other stuff that is Polkadot should actually do. So what we do is we put a computer program encoded in WebAssembly onto the chain, and then all that Polkadot does, which is a meta protocol, is run that computer program, right? And that computer program, which is defined on chain and therefore is eminently changeable and adaptable and evolvable, that computer program contains Polkadot. And we've already demonstrated this, 20 or so times, how we can change this computer program, the Polkadot, we call it the runtime, which is a bit of a dodgy naming, but never mind, how we can change this computer program and show how this changes the fundamental business logic of Polkadot. And we do it because it's stored on the chain, it piggybacks on our existing consensus. So we don't need that. Basically, like, if you do hard forks, you might have heard of hard forks, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all that sort of stuff. If you do hard forks, you have to get everyone's like individual permission. Basically, you have to go to all the miners. Hey, you're going to actually upgrade, because if you're not, then the network's going to like have a fork and it'll be really problematic. And as we saw with the classic fork, it's like not always so easy to get everybody on board. And what we do, because this sort of code is stored on the chain itself, we can guarantee that everybody is on board because it's just part of the protocol, part of the meta protocol. The actual nuts, the real stuff is written in this language. That's the real Polkadot stuff. But the stuff that, because it's a meta protocol, the stuff that defines Polkadot is on the chain, it's stored on the chain in this WebAssembly language.
Great. So it's also really interesting how you've brought Polkadot into the wild. Again, quite a novel approach. So initially you launched the Kusama network, which is still live. I don't know if that was regarded as a test net. Could you explain that approach, and what is the future of Kusama? Does it coexist alongside Polkadot? How do they interact?
Sure. So Kusama is a canary network. So what we mean by this, it's a little bit like Litecoin compared to Bitcoin. So it's not a test net because it actually has people value Kusama tokens. It has a value. Like, if you look at the Bitcoin test net, it doesn't have a value. Like, you can't buy test net Bitcoin on exchanges. Though I think there was actually a time where you could buy a little bit. But anyway, the reason I call it a canary net is because it sort of does everything before Polkadot. So when we have big changes to make to Polkadot, or interesting sort of experiments that we think are probably too interesting for Polkadot, too experimental for Polkadot, then we put it on Kusama. We put it on this canary network, try it out. The reason it's not a test net is because, or the reason it doesn't, we don't want to do it as a test net is because a lot of these experiments rely upon people actually treating the underlying sort of tokens or the network with value. For example, if you have a governance system, you can't test the governance system out on a test net in any sensible way because nobody cares what happens, right? It's a test net. You can always restart it. It does, like, no one has any long-term sort of meat.
There's no hard incentive or disincentive to the game, right?
Yeah.
You want to test how a game plays out. Yeah.
That's it. So another way of calling it would be like a value-bearing testnet, in that we are kind of using it to test, but we're using it to test in a real-world scenario. So yeah, Kusama is basically a sort of real-world experimental testnet with value on it for Polkadot, and we absolutely want to keep it around. It's a really important piece of infrastructure for Polkadot's sort of continuing evolution. We don't want to roll stuff out on Polkadot before we've tested it on Kusama, before we've seen how it works in the wild.
Yeah, and that makes sense, of course, as there's increasing economic load on Polkadot to kind of somehow separate or partition, I guess, risk from innovation and experimentation. So let's come back to the parachain concept, this idea of 100 blockchains within the blockchain. So parachains are specialized shards of Polkadot that give projects and their communities agency, this word agency again, over their respective goals. You mentioned the number 100 could be 99. Is the idea that these would be specialized to particular use cases, industries, stakeholders, or are you kind of just leaving that open to the market to decide bottom up?
Yep, very much. So we have, and they're like these 100 slots. I mean, I don't know how many they're going to be really, but we hope we're sort of aiming around 100. And there are a few things that these slots could do. Obviously, a number of these slots are going to be system parachains, so they're going to handle things that are fairly intrinsic to Polkadot and do stuff that is kind of in as we say, the common good sort of functionality that benefits everybody on the Polkadot network and nobody sort of disproportionately. So that's the one sort of set of slots, and I would think maybe 5 or 10 parachains are going to be used, like 5 or 10% of the slots will be used for this. Then we've got para threads. These use up slots, but they do so in a sort of resource sharing way. So it's sort of like a time slice. It's like a timeshare. Projects can come and one block at a time use one of these slots for their project, and then the next block some other project uses this slot. So the idea is that there's probably going to be, I don't know, a few dozen perhaps slots given over to allowing power threads to execute, and then the rest will be sort of auctioned off in this auction system that we've come, which is basically, it's not really an auction because you don't really pay anything. It's lease. It's sort of a reverse auction for is it? No, sorry, it's not even a reverse auction. It's just a standard auction, but for leasing these slots. And you put your money, you put your dots in, and the dots kind of get locked up along with the parachain for the period that you're actually using up the slot, and they get unlocked once you're done. And yeah, it's what's going to be in those slots is really tough to say, and we are very much up for leaving it to the market. We don't have a big. We obviously see some projects and we have an idea of the sorts of hot things that people are itching to deploy, but we don't have for these bunch of slots any sort of desire to control or whatever what goes in there.
And do you think that there will be network effects within parachains? Do you think there's going to be a period of competition? So we'll talk about the idea of IPOs in a little bit. Initial parachain offering, as you were saying, you need to have a certain amount of DOT to be able to participate, and so people might crowdfund DOTs in able to bid. So they have to, presumably, if they don't already own enough, they'd have to demonstrate to the community that they're going to bring value to the Polkadot network. But as I mentioned earlier, we had Betty of Akala Network on, and it's very much their mission to be the DeFi parachain. Like, do you think there will be a period of competition and then it will kind of coalesce into a form of network effect, or do you have any feeling on how that might play out?
I think there's probably going to be not really. I think there's probably going to be a few chains that launch. I think there will be a lot of kind of semi-general purpose chains. So chains that have a rough direction that they go in, but that also have like a smart contracts framework on them so that they can kind of host other stuff. And they end up kind of just evolving into whatever the market needs. I think there will be network effects within the chains. And I think there will be eventually kind of partnerships between these chains. I think we will see sort of wormholes going between the chains where it becomes very easy to interact between certain subsystems within these chains. For example, you might have decentralized exchanges that exist on multiple different chains, and they every 5 blocks or something, they kind of just equalize out so that they move their prices, they equalize their prices between them. I think we'll see a lot of innovation and it's always difficult to say what's going to come out of this. It may end up being that, over the course of the next 6-12 months, we kind of see an almost Polkadot, what would you call it, consortium or mafia almost form amongst some of the bigger parachains, kind of building up their systems, integrating their systems between each other, forming partnerships, and so on. But I think there's enough slots so that it's not going to be. I think we will see continuous refreshing, continuous sort of churn of applications coming in, and especially with para threads that allow sort of short-lived or sort of experimental platforms and dApps to be sort of brought into the Polkadot chain. And if they end up doing something that's really useful, they'll probably stick around and become parachains over time. So I think we are going to see a lot of innovation, but I think there's also a possibility that some of these early players will try to do some forms of sort of partnerships between themselves. It's going to be really interesting to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost definitely going to be a project called Polka Mafia, isn't there, at some point? That's just, I need to go buy the URL quickly or whatever. And equally, seeing the Explorer to navigate and map all that is going to be super fascinating. So can't wait to see that happen. You also talk about chain mergers and acquisitions. So is that talking about how these sovereignties as parachains will interact? So you talked about it in a very collaborative way. Could there be more aggressive acquisitions, mergers within parachains? And how would that work?
In theory, sure. In theory. How would it work? Well, basically, these parachains each have governance systems within them. In theory, a parachain could buy a sufficient amount of tokens of another parachain in order to sort of basically like take over and be able to make its own governance changes. And then at this point, it would basically be able to decide how that parachain went forward. It would be able to, in principle, move its kind of basically combine the two. Very similar to how it works in the corporate world, really. And I can't there's all sorts of small sort of technical questions that pop into my head when I consider this, but I don't, in theory, it's 100% possible. It's just whether you could buy up enough on the market, I don't know, whether you'd have to maybe find a few whales that sold the parachain from one of them. I'm not quite sure how it would get to the point of controlling, let's say, 51% of the tokens of another parachain. But if it ever did, then yeah, for sure it could. You could basically do whatever it wanted, which could include moving all of everything off one parachain and bringing it into another and integrating it into its existing systems.
Wow, yeah, that's a conversation that needs to happen over a pint, I guess. So as a founder and as somebody that's leading different business in Parity, an organization like Web3, how do you stay benevolent, but at the same time give direction to that open market and the experimentation and innovation that's going to be happening?
Well, I don't think it's too difficult to stay benevolent. The question is whether you, whether you rule. If you're going to be giving this direction, are you going to be able to? To sort of get the buy-in from those who it is that you're sort of giving the direction to. So you always, in my mind, it's always worth considering yourself more of a kind of teacher almost than a sort of traditional leader. Leadership has a number of things, but a number of sort of facets to it. But I think really important in this sort of open systems movement, open source movement, whatever you want to call it, is in terms of leadership, really explaining why it is that you're saying what you're saying. And in that sense, being a teacher, getting that intellectual buy-in, I think, is crucial.
So as a founder, I mean, you've been through several cycles. There's been this big focus on infrastructure. Do you think, is there a type of Web3 founder that would be successful? Do you think that's changing now? Does it need to change? We're doing different types of people coming to the system and contributing. And how do you see the evolution of Polkadot? Do you think that, I go back to, I forget the number of people that were building or using various implementations of Polkadot. Is there going to have to be this focus on middleware being built out by the ecosystem? And to what extent would Parity look to do that versus to allow the ecosystem to kind of just have that happen bottom up?
Well, from my hat as president of the Web3 Foundation, we really do want to engage with as many teams as possible and seed all of this stuff. From my hat as a person on the Polkadot and Kusama Treasury Council, I'd say the same. We really want to ensure that those who are really interested and enthusiastic about doing this work get supported accordingly. And yeah, from my hat as sort of as the founder of Parity, then yeah, I'm happy for us to do as much, to take on as much as we can. But at the end of the day, you can only focus on so much, and you should pick and choose what it is that you spend your time and your focus on, and it should be that which you're really excited about, enthusiastic over, and you shouldn't try and take on more than that which you really want to do, and you should let other people do that as much as possible. So we want to build some tooling. Yes, we want to sort of carry on building Substrate and making it as great as possible. But the degree to which we do more than that is probably going to be a question of how well we can scale out more than how well we can scale up. So, and I think this is like a really crucial thing to remember within the Web3 ecosystem as a founder. It's like, in my mind, you shouldn't really be trying to build the next sort of Google or Amazon or Microsoft where you've got tens of thousands of employees working under you, because that's not really in fitting with the decentralized nature of what you're building.
So what are the big problems, challenges, opportunities that you want to have the ecosystem respond to? There's a lot of people looking at Polkadot. As I said, there's a lot of money looking to go into projects that are building in Polkadot. Where do you think the opportunities are? Or, what are the big challenges that you see that you would like solved?
I think, one of the biggest ones is using governance effectively. So we have these treasuries, they've got millions in them, and we really need to deploy this for the good of the ecosystem. So we need to build those tools and those sort of systems, infrastructures, frameworks, so that people can really, so we can do this capital allocation, so that we can in a decentralized fashion come to deploy this massive amount of capital that we've got for the good of the network. And that's something that's still in its early days. We've seen other protocols. Dash, I think, was one of the first that had this. But we need to do better. We need to really. We've got the basic building blocks for DAOs, so we really need to push forward. And we've got a few things. We've got like bounties. We've got tips. We've got a few sort of ways that this money, this capital can be sort of deployed, allocated. But it's only the tip of the iceberg, and we really need to push forward in terms of building appropriate structure to actually be able to use it. Another one is monitoring. Like I love monitoring tools. So as much as possible, and I think a lot of people in the ecosystem like them. I know validators love monitoring tools. And as we grow, as we have these, not just the Polkadot network and the Kusama network, but also another 100, 200, who knows how many sort of parachains running, we're going to want to be able to monitor them. We're going to want tools for checking that this stuff is working properly. So I think there's still a lot of room, a lot of innovation that can be done there with building these kinds of pieces of tooling. And it's like, yeah, Parity's doing some of this stuff, but again, we're still only so many people. We can only still focus on so many things. So I think there's a lot of potential innovation there. Other than that, I mean, there's, the sky's the limit with regards to parachains. We've got, DeFi chains and privacy chains and asset chains and smart contract chains, compatibility chains. And I think there's a lot of potential for more like social level chains, whether it's sort of reputation and self-sovereign identity, or whether it's like more like kind of collective management. Let's form groups. Let's pool resources. DAOE kind of style things. I think there's a lot of potential for using blockchain to manage that kind of stuff. But I mean, I don't know. There's a ton of potential stuff that can happen. And I think the big value add isn't necessarily going to be any one of these, but when they start to hook up with each other and you end up with composite systems, you end up with, what we're seeing with DeFi, and that because they're all in the same system, you got 4, 5, 6, 7 things that are all sort of interacting with each other. And that's where the real value creation is. That's where the real innovation comes from. And thankfully, within Polkadot, we've got parachains, we've got XCMP, we've got the cross-chain messaging formats. So this is stuff that we are like nicely confident that we can really push forward. But the platform's only one thing. You also need to have these things that sit on the platform that want to talk to each other, and that's going to be a key push forward.
And so the big question, I kind of did a push out on Twitter, as I said earlier, for questions. There were a load. We're not going to have time to answer all of them. We might get a couple in. So the big question, the repeat question was, how does this coexist, sit alongside Ethereum, whether it's Ethereum 1.0 or 2.0 or 3.0? So how does it coexist? And looking at Ethereum from a Polkadot perspective of where you are now, what do you see Ethereum becoming? Will it be just a settlement layer in a kind of subset of DeFi, or how do you look at Ethereum in the context of where Polkadot might go?
I mean, honestly, at this point, it's a really, like, obviously there's ETH1, and for ETH1 we want to facilitate like that technology set, or people that know that technology set as much as possible within Polkadot, which is why we have Solidity to WASM compiler, which is why we have a bridge system so that you can easily connect your Polkadot, your Ethereum, open Ethereum private chains into Polkadot, which is why we have the Ethereum compatibility, the EVM compatibility system, and which is why we have the Ethereum mainnet bridge under development. So we've got these various ways that you can use Ethereum with Polkadot, and it works in many of them. It works super, super transparently. It just, you just deploy and it works. So with regards to ETH1, I see Polkadot as being a sort of big sort of system that can really magnify the effects of what's going on the Ethereum mainnet, and also facilitate everybody that has already been building on the platform to bring their stuff and have it sort of work underneath or alongside sort of other systems within Polkadot. Now, when you start saying, oh, well, what about ETH2? Then it's a much more difficult question to answer, because ETH2 has evolved so much over the past, over its sort of lifetime. It's not really born yet, so it's difficult to call it really a lifetime. But over the course that it's been an idea, it has evolved a lot. And even some of the things that some of the ETH2 researchers have come out with have made it look quite a lot like Polkadot, like talking about how the ETH2 shards should have domain specialization functions within them so that they can do certain things much faster. Sounds quite a lot like a heterogeneous multi-chain. So I think there's still a lot of ideation going on with ETH2. And I mean, they're kind of just about at the point of having this beacon chain. But I mean, that's step one, probably the easiest step of their 5-point thing. So it's going to be a long while in my mind before ETH2 is at a point that it's as useful as ETH1, and depending on precisely what features and functionalities they decide to put into ETH2 will determine to what degree it's sort of trying to sidle up as a copycat of Polkadot, or whether it's like legitimately going to focus on just being a scalable but otherwise pure smart contract chain version of ETH1. And I think if it's the latter, then there's a lot of potential to collaborate, to sort of build bridge and have Ethereum 2 basically be a sort of premier smart contract sort of part of Polkadot. But if they sort of take a lot longer and they try and decide to bring in a lot of the Polkadot features and try to make it sort of the best possible thing of everything, then I think it's going to be a lot harder. I think the two could end up potentially sort of being an either or sort of thing. So it's at this point it's really difficult to tell. But I think the future it could go either way. It could be that they are very much sort of complementary, but it could be that they end up becoming quite competitive.
Gavin, thanks so much for your time and your candidness. As I said, I would love to do a retrospective on all the stuff we didn't get to talk about. Maybe we have to save that for a Web3 documentary at some point when the world's been transformed. But thanks again for your time and good luck with Polkadot.
Thanks a lot, Jamie.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and share your feedback to help us reach as many people as possible with the important mission of Web3.